Hello, everyone, and welcome. Just to let you know, we'll start the presentation in about a minute. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Just to let you know, we'll start the presentation in about 30 seconds. An official hello and welcome everyone to today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast, the ROI of Visual AI for EHS, Unlocking the Power of Data, sponsored by Spark Cognition. This is Alan Ferguson. I'm Associate Editor at Safety and Health and co-host of the On the Safe Side podcast, and I'll be moderating today's session. Thank you so much for joining us. In a few minutes, we'll start the presentation, but let's review some preliminary items. The views of today's speakers and organization are their own and may not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise product or publication does not necessarily mean the council or the magazine endorses those items. Although we will not conduct a live question and answer session at the end of today's webcast, we encourage you to submit your questions at any time during this presentation. The questions will be forwarded to today's sponsor. To ask a question, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and click the send button. At the end of this webcast, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey to provide feedback, and we'll let you know more about that a little bit later. Just to let you know, this webcast will be archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, please visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. Also, just to let you know, our sponsors generously provided two resources, an HSE ROI calculator and a visual AI product sheet. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. With us today are Jody Sass, Managing Director of Visual AI Solutions at Spark Cognition, and John Hasslinger, Vice President of Visual AI Solutions at Spark Cognition. Again, we thank you all for tuning in this presentation. Without further ado, here's Jody Sass.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Want to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Jody Sass, and I'm the Managing Director of Visual AI Solutions for Spark Cognition. We are excited to have you today to learn more about the role of visual AI and how you derive ROI benefit from implementing a visual AI solution. Myself and my colleague John Hasslinger are excited to have you today and look forward to sharing. John, do you want to give a little background about yourself?
Thank you. Really excited to be here with everyone today. I'm John Hasslinger, the Vice President of Visual AI Solutions here at Spark Cognition. And just a little bit about my background and where I'm coming from is I'm very much on the technical and data science side of the solution. But prior to actually moving into data science, I spent over a decade working in manufacturing and energy fields. So a lot of these HSE challenges, these risk management challenges, are ones that are near and dear to me. And I understand some of the pain points that we've all faced to address these today. So really excited to be here to talk to you about this. And I'll let Jody sort of set the ground for us, talking a little bit about the current state and some of the costs of workplace accidents we face today.
Thank you so much, John. So as we step back and we look at the cost of workplace accidents, you can look at these statistics and see how staggering they actually are. In a given year, we see that there are approximately 3 million non-fatal workplace injuries and about 5,000 fatal occupational injuries in the US alone. Now, we as EHS professionals never anticipate that our employees are going to come into the office, come into our facility, and not go home at the end of the day without injury. What's alarming as I think about not only the number of workplace accidents, but the cost associated with it. And those costs are both in a direct form and an indirect form. If you think about the direct cost, 40,000 is the average per incident for a non-fatal incident, and about $1.2 million per fatality. So I think we can understand and agree upon that there is a mission and imperative that is forcing us to take action, both in the number and cost of workplace accidents. So if we look at where we are today with the rate and pace of accidents and the occurrence of those accidents, I think you'll see by looking at this slide that we've reached a point of stagnation. We've been making such terrific investments over the past 20 years, but something happened midway through that we hit this point where we flattened out. And I guess the thing that we need to think about is, how do we change this trajectory that we are on right now, where the existing investments that we are making are not having the desired outcomes that we are looking for?
I think that's a great point, Jody. And I don't think that the plateauing we're seeing over the last 10 years is due to lack of effort. I think we're actually getting very good with the tools that we have today. But just unfortunately, the toolkit that we have today can only take us so far, and that's why we're seeing this plateauing here. That's a great point.
Thank you for that, John. What is it about the existing programs that seem to be causing this plateau, this stagnation that we're seeing? If I reflect upon all the conversations that I'm having with all of you on a day-to-day basis, I think a few things come up quite consistently. One, as we think about the programs and how we are identifying exposure points, they're typically reactive in nature, and we are usually focused on those areas that have bubbled up when an incident has occurred, and then being very targeted to solve that specific incident and putting in a program that meets that specific needs. The other piece of this is there is a human element to these HSE programs. So one, the training programs that we all know and love, as we implement those, sometimes we don't think about how an individual may learn, how they process data. Did they really understand it? Can they apply it effectively in the environment and then remain consistent with that knowledge that they've acquired? So we're all human. We all have different ways of processing information, but we also have our inherent biases on how we think things may be done or should be done. And this could be based upon previous experiences. I know in a lot of the environments I speak in, folks have been there for 20 or 30 years. We might train them on best practices, but oftentimes they revert back to those prior methods that have served them well over the years. I also think, we as humans can't supervise these environments 24 hours a day, every single shift, and do them justice. And then the third area where I think there is challenge in HSE programs is the very manual nature of it. We rely heavily on individuals to self-report. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And then the other method of reporting is when we do audits, but that is dependent upon us being at the right place at the right time when an incident has occurred. And there's also sometimes a scenario where if somebody knows that the audit is taking place, maybe they perform those tasks as they have been trained on and as expected, but not how they are typically doing on a day-to-day basis. And this is why visibility matters into all of these different programs that we had, whether they're historical visibility and bringing that to be proactive, why it's important to have visibility over what folks are doing, and then really visibility to augment the current reporting methods that are in place today. John, why don't you take us into a little bit more on visibility and why it's so critical?
Thank you, Jody. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. People cannot be everywhere and they can't see everything to monitor every activity. And we know that actually finding, hiring, and retaining experienced and skilled HSE professionals is getting harder and harder. So this all compounds the problem of having visibility into your leading indicators of risk. And visibility into those leading indicators of risks, which are from your Bird's triangle or HSE pyramid, are those near misses and unsafe acts, have occur much more frequently than actually your serious reportable incidents, but all are directly correlated with this pretty linear relationship between increases in unsafe acts and increases in minor or serious injuries. Now, fortunately, fatality rates, major amputations are happening infrequently enough that they may not happen every year in every site. So fortunately, these items don't occur that often. So we can't use the major incidents as our only measure of risk, because we can have a big change in our risk profile. And just because these very severe incidents aren't happening that often, we won't know about, if we only rely on the severe incidents to tell us what risks we're facing, we won't know about the change in our risk profile until it's way too late and we're dealing with a major incident. So that's why measuring the base of the HSE pyramid is so important. And as Jody mentioned, we try to do it today, but unfortunately, we're generally relying on human input, manual input, which does contribute to basically having an incomplete picture of that. I mean, personally, I know that when I was, putting in concern reports or writing stop cards, I only entered the risks that I was familiar and I saw. So risks that I became accustomed to taking, for example, working too close to vehicles that were moving quickly, I actually wouldn't manually report because I had become accustomed to that and that risk had been normalized. Now, an outside auditor would see that, but that only depends on the outside auditor being available and coming to that site. So that's why it's so incredibly important when you're talking about making an HSE investment to get an accurate measure of that base of that pyramid, so you can identify, all right, what is my biggest risk area today, so I can target that. And then also, after you make an HSE investment, be it into a training program, hard guarding, what have you, being able to measure that change very quickly after you've made that investment in that HSE program, to see what is the benefit that we've gained. Because the benefits of this HSE pyramid approach is, if you reduce your unsafe acts by 60%, essentially you've reduced the likelihood of having a serious incident by 60%, which then you can pretty directly correlate to say, well, we've reduced our potential HSE costs by 60% related to this hazard. So it's really, really important when you're evaluating the ROI of your HSE investments to get a good measure of that base of this HSE period, so you can get good, strong data to allow you to evaluate your HSE investments. Now, to go on to some of the specifics around some of the business cases for HSE investment, and to give you some numbers, one that I like to start off talking about is actually not about the direct return, but the indirect benefits of having a strong health and safety culture in the workplace, where the majority of employees and workers said that they want to work for, and they would work hard for, an organization that they feel invests in their health and safety. Intuitively, that kind of makes sense when you see this statistic played out, that people want to work for companies that they feel care about them, care about their wellness. And surveys show that in addition to the moral imperative to address EHS issues, that it's actually a smart business decision and provides strong investment returns. In the set of companies that was surveyed, those companies that had an inspection focus on EHS issues saved almost $360,000 in injury claims and compensation. And 60% of the CFOs in organizations surveyed felt that their investments in EHS and injury prevention programs returned $2 or more for every single dollar invested, and 40% of them cited productivity as a top benefit for workplace safety. So not only do we get great direct benefits from investments in EHS programs, but also we get these indirect benefits of increased productivity and employee morale. And also, along with that, there's a positive correlation between this investment and obviously your ROI and your ability to retain people. So when HR firms have gone out there and surveyed candidates in a number of critical industries, they found that workplace safety was among one of the top criterias that candidates look for when evaluating a new job offer. And that makes sense. Everyone wants to work in a place where they feel taken care of, they feel protected, and they feel like their employer wants them to go home safe at the end of the day. Ultimately, all these indirect benefits of being able to attract better people, having better employee retention, better morale in the workplace, as well as the direct benefits of the increased ROI and that $2 return for every dollar spent, all build a really strong, compelling business case for EHS investment.
I think many times we see that folks are focusing solely on the direct costs. And those are great because they're quantifiable, but those indirect costs, like employee satisfaction, employee engagement, brand awareness, are things that should be looked at because they are part of a total picture that helps create a holistic business case for the organization. So when you think about technology and investments in HSE, we have done a terrific job with the investments we've made to date. However, is that exposure point that we've reached a point of stagnation where they are no longer driving the desired outcomes. Now, we're not saying that they are not good investments, because they are good investments and they are essential. However, they can be complemented with other capabilities like visual AI, which we're talking about today, that can help enhance the benefit and bring the benefits to the forefront. So if I look at, say we do a lot of monitoring and audits, right? These things are going to continue to take place. However, they are subject to the human risk factor that, in this scenario, we're looking at an individual looking at all these camera feeds. We based upon the research, an individual can only stay focused for 17 minutes before they get distracted. Now we're piping in all of these different cameras from throughout our site or sites into one command center for somebody to watch every single camera. With visual AI and with the augmentation of technology, now you can highlight for individuals where they really need to focus, and even potentially free up time for this individual to go focus on other acts or activities. Then we've got, the physical prevention methods, the chains, the cones, still really, really critical, but they really need to be maintained. And they need to always be evaluated. Is that the correct program for the risk that we're mitigating? I have a scenario where, a client of mine had a cone that was, around, there were several cones around a crater in the floor, but somebody moved them. And unfortunately, there was an incident that occurred that was fatal in nature. Again, could you leverage, and the answer is yes, technology to say, are my physical prevention barriers in place to mitigate the risk? And then, of course, there's training and compliance. And I think this is an area we all know how to invest in, training and compliance. And, our organizations are very comfortable buying and training and compliance, but we don't look at, are those compliance programs, are those training programs providing the long-term desired outcomes that we're looking for? Are they impacting the injury rate, the incident rate, the frequency of those incidents that are occurring? And then how do we double down on the things that are, performing well, and then move away from those areas that aren't performing well? What I described was a little bit about, visual AI and how it can complement, but I think it's important to really dig into what is visual AI. And John, I'll let you speak to that.
Thanks, Jody. And visual AI and is a term that sometimes gets misused or used to talk about many different technologies. So I want to clarify a little bit about what it means to us when we talk about visual AI technologies and how they can enhance health and safety. So what it is a technology that's basically consuming your rich media, your video feeds essentially, and understanding what's happening in the scene. And that's more than just looking at it and saying, oh, there's 3 people and 2 trucks in this scene, for sort of the insights from a single frame. That's definitely part of it to understand what the objects are in the scene, but it's also really understanding what's happening in that scene, what's going on. For example, Are a person and a vehicle on a collision course towards each other? How quickly are things moving towards each other? How long has someone been in a specific uh, spot? Someone that's on the ground, are they working on the ground or are they down on the ground not moving? These are all the capabilities that a comprehensive health and safety visual AI solution needs to have to really understand what's happening in the site and be able to surface up the risks. Because if you think about it practically, just being able to say, oh, well, there's 7 people in this part of the plant, 4 people in here, 2 trucks there, that's not going to actually give you visibility into your risk profile. What you need to understand is what people are doing, what activities are going on, and specifically what hazardous activities may be going on. As Jody said, have things been moved? Has a barrier been moved? Where am I? Or inversely, what we see with some customers as well is what's happening. Where are my hotspots for having my most common unsafe activities? How often? Where do I have people frequently getting too close to a piece of moving machinery? And then that's a great insight from visual AI that has seen understanding to say, all right, this is where it would make sense to invest in hard guarding. If we put up a little barrier fence there, it'll help eliminate these areas of potential risk, and then maximize that sort of return on investment for putting up hard guarding. So really, visual AI in the context that we're looking at here is a solution that works with essentially camera feeds from any sort of camera that you might have in your plant, new or existing, and extracts scene understanding from it to understand what's going on in that site, and then is able to distill that down into specific risks that can then be acted on by HSE and management teams.
So how does this actually work? And John was talking about the camera feeds. Today in our environment, what we do is, we all have cameras. Those cameras are connected to some sort of recording device. And when we go back to those video feeds, that's usually for forensic purposes to really understand what has occurred, why it occurred, when it occurred, what the scenario was. And again, John, you mentioned scene understanding. What was that situation? And it's very reactive in nature to what actually could be proactive. And the AI enabled approach now enables us to really change that paradigm from reactive to proactive. Because now what we're able to do is leverage those existing cameras that are in place today, add an element of software to that camera environment on a small edge device. And what we actually do is we have the AI look at those video feeds in real time and surface up alerts based upon areas of exposure. And those areas of exposure are the places that you, the customer, have defined as your hotspots. So it enables you to constantly evaluate where those hotspots are, take proactive and preventative action on near miss and unsafe acts, ultimately mitigating the exposure and risk that we will face from these scenarios.
That's a great point, Jody. And that granularity and the insights that you get because you have all this data that you can then slice and trend is super informative. I mean, you might even learn that, oh, well, it's my morning shift doesn't see these incidents, but the afternoon shift has this exposure to working under suspended loads. That allows that training to be super targeted and be super impactful because you've had a bunch of new hires on that team that are not familiar with the safety procedures. So you can just target the population you need to target and be as impactful as possible with every training effort, every training hour, every training dollar. So to talk a little bit more about what the solution is that we're talking about here today, which is the visual AI software, it's a AI software, as Jody was talking about, that runs on the edge or runs on your site to process the video feed so they don't have to be transmitted outside of your control. And it's a technology that's really been proven over the last several years where with this specific instance, we have over 130,000 cameras that are actually running this technology. So you can rest assured that it's been developed to deploy and scale quickly, and also has been tested and is robust, operating in many different countries, which does bring up the important point that the solution is set up in a way that can work within all the various privacy laws, GDPR requirements that do come up across Europe, the UK, and other company policies as well. As Jody mentioned, it'll work with your existing cameras, so you don't necessarily have to rip and replace cameras from your existing facilities. You can start with the cameras you have in place. If you want to augment them to cover different additional sites or additional area, that's all easy to do, and just essentially add them on to the software solution. And while today we're mostly talking about health and safety use cases and health and safety applications, I do want to highlight that Spark Cognition Visual AI Advisor does have applications in also security, productivity, visual inspection, and situational awareness. Because when you're looking at a solution, and today we're talking about ROI, if you have a solution that can be used for many different outcomes, many different answers, ultimately it greatly improves your ROI. Because you can imagine, if you have one software solution that helps you with your HSE challenges, but then also can be used by your security team for their perimeter monitoring and weapons detection that they're trying to do, then also is maybe used by an operations engineering team to track equipment utilization. You're getting many benefits out of the same system instead of having to buy multiple different systems. So ultimately, your ROI is going to be much higher in these sorts of scenarios.
And John, if I can just add there, I think because we scale across all of these different categories, the benefit across the businesses there, which John has shared, but it also enables you to leverage those different parts of the organization for contribution and benefit into the platform, because the benefit derived doesn't just hit health and safety. It does hit productivity. There are efficiency gains. There are security benefits that can come from the solution as well. So from a very simple investment, the return is across so many categories. The other thing that I think is really interesting about the solution, and maybe John, I ask you this question, is the other integrations into other systems of record, more specifically incident management systems. I get very passionate about that. But I'm going to ask you, being the technologist here, to share a little bit about the benefits there.
Now, that's a great point, Jody, and especially when you're considering the adoption burden of a system, how it integrates with your existing systems, your existing incident management systems or health and safety systems of record can be very important. Because if ultimately you have a system that integrates seamlessly with your existing workflows and systems, the onboarding burden is going to be much less versus having to train your entire population on how to use a new system. Then you've got multiple different panes of glass you're looking at. And that's one of the great things I think about this solution is we've designed it to be very flexible, and we have many out-of-the-box integrations with EHS reporting systems, for example, things like Benchmark, where the AI can automatically be monitoring for those health and safety risks, and then automatically populate that concern report directly into your reporting system and your corporate database. So you can integrate that with other corporate data you may have, and then follow up with it within your existing workflow, which really makes it easy to onboard for your employees because they're not seeing big changes to their workflows, and it lets you leverage the technology investments that you've already made across your organization.
Thanks for that, John.
So to give you some specific examples, I wanted to talk about some of the specific challenges that some of the users of this solution are using today. I mean, as I mentioned, there are well over 100 use cases for this, and frankly, I could sit here all day talking about the benefits that people have seen on specific use cases, and I'd encourage you guys to reach out if you have questions about specific use cases and applications. But I just want to highlight quickly some specific HSE challenges that many of our clients are using again and again across their sites to address common HSE risks. The first one that I'm going to talk about is fire detection. Fire is a risk that many companies work with, many industries work with, and especially in certain companies, you may have heightened risks of fires, be it from piles of waste and debris or from hot work or other activities going on, you do have critical risks around fire. And this is where the AI can supplement some of your controls and processes. Everything from having the AI act as a second set of eyes for fire watch, to around hot work activities to see if there is any fire that's developing during the activity or afterwards, and also being able to monitor large areas for early signs of smoke and fire detection. Inside we may have smoke detectors, fire detectors, heat detection systems, but especially outside in yards and other facilities outside, it's very hard today to monitor for fire. And a lot of the companies that I've worked with these solutions, have had significant losses where, for example, a fire starts out in their yard, maybe even over the weekend or after hours when no one's on site. With an AI solution, as soon as you start seeing smoke and fire, and the AI detects that, you can have an alert raised in real time so people can respond much faster, and ultimately the impact of that incident can be much, much smaller. Another use case that's very common is person in distress that is coupled with lone worker monitoring. Especially in large sites where you may not have someone right nearby you working, or someone comes in on the night, late at night or on the weekend just to finish something up, pick something up for a customer, etc. You've got a lone worker situation, and I know HSE professionals try and put in controls as much as possible to minimize the risk to a lone worker, but when we rely on someone to check in or give them a notification device like a panic button if they're in distress, that still requires the person to take action, and sometimes scenarios evolve, especially in chemical plants where you may have gases that are released, or someone may have a medical issue where they suddenly are overcome, fainting, etc., and they're not able to trigger the panic button. And that's where the AI can be really beneficial, because the AI can monitor. If it sees someone that's down in a position of distress, almost instantly raise an alert, let someone know, and get that person help. And I'm sure your medical professionals and colleagues will tell you that in a lot of health incidents, a lot of medical incidents, that if you can get someone assistance within the first 10 minutes, that the outcomes are going to be significantly better than if, for example, the person is in distress for several hours before their colleagues notice, wait, this person didn't come home. Maybe their family member calls and says, hey, John never came home. He said he was just going to go there to the plant for a minute, but he didn't come back. And then I've been there in distress for several hours. Unfortunately, the statistics say the outcomes for me are going to be much worse. Another place where the AI can supplement is with confined space or hazardous space entry and entry logging, where the AI can not only detect if people are entering confined or hazardous spaces, and ensure that if they are, the proper permits, etc., are in place, but also it can supplement that with entry and exit logging. Because you can imagine, in addition to protecting workers, you want to protect responders. So it's very important to be able to say, well, I know exactly we have 3 employees, they're in tank number 2, and those are the people that need help, and the rest of the tanks are empty. That's going to not only help those people that are in distress get help quickly, but also minimize the exposure to the first responders that are helping in that case. And today, I know we often keep paper entry logs, but the AI can also be an automated secondary layer that can back that up. Because personally, I know that with permits and paperwork, sometimes people forget things. I'd forget things. I'd miss a step. I wouldn't log something in there. And this is where the technology can help. Other use cases can be things like PPE compliance, especially for high-risk activities like chemical handling or solvent handling. If there's special procedures, PPE for high-risk activities, the AI can supplement that and act as a reminder that, you got to put on the apron and the long gloves if you're going to be handling these types of chemicals. 2 other areas that I'll quickly touch on are around vehicle management. For a lot of our customers that have yards where they especially have contractor or third-party vehicles coming in and out, and they have their employees working and walking around in those yards, pedestrians or employees being struck by vehicles is one of their biggest risks. And with contractor and third-party vehicles, it's very, very hard to drive safety programs in the conventional ways with training or putting governors on those vehicles, etc. So that's where the AI can work and basically monitor those vehicles as they come in and generate an alert if a hazard is seen in near real time. So if a contractor is driving too fast, the AI notices that, generates an alert, feedback can be given there, and also the AI can capture, a snapshot of that truck. So if you want to talk about that during a supplier management or performance review with them, you have all the evidence there. Also more mundane things such as traffic rule compliance for people coming in the right ways, if they're supposed to stop to sign in at a certain spot, making sure that all that's happening to minimize the risk of all those operations in your yard. The final one I want to highlight is under suspended loads. And if you work with cranes or around cranes, be it gantry cranes or mobile cranes, or even in activities where you have scaffolding and people working at different heights, working in the red zone under a load is probably one of the biggest risks that you address. And this again is where the AI can help a lot. I've worked in plants where we had gantry cranes that had flashing lights and buzzers on them. And I'll tell you that I would say probably by my second day there, I basically became accustomed to that light and that buzzer going off and no longer even looked up when the crane was running. So there were definitely times where the crane would be right over me and I'd be oblivious to it because essentially I'd become accustomed to that light and buzzer going off all the time. And that's where the AI can be super impactful, where the AI basically is monitoring for people that are near or in the cone underneath the suspended load of the crane, and then potentially even be integrated with a specific alerting siren. So if someone's too close to the crane, instead of just this buzzer that everyone gets used to hearing all the time, a targeted alert goes off. So then I know, oh wait, I'm in the line of fire, I better move right now. And we avoid this alert fatigue that can happen. So there are a lot of use cases you can see here, and this is just a small subset of them that can address some of the common top risks that do occur in industrial sites, plants today.
And John, I really like that last example because it's interesting as we engage with customers and they share their videos with us and we run them through the system, it is eye-opening to what people see that they never thought was going on in their organization. And, we had one EHS leader that was so blown away. He's like, this is my best site. How can this be happening at my best site? And, it happens. And again, these are why these types of technologies to complement the existing protocols are so critical to keep our employees safe.
That's absolutely right, Jody. So what you build essentially when you deploy this kind of technology and use it in your workflows is you basically create this virtuous cycle where you start out by really being able to uncover and identify your unsafe acts, your near misses, your leading indicators of incidents, identify which ones are your biggest risks and exposures because you have that automated reporting and you can then analyze those trends. Then you can target those specific hotspots, be it a specific plant, a shift, even an area within a specific plant for a specific hazard. So you're making a very targeted HSE investment to address that. Then you can measure the benefit of that HSE investment by continuing to monitor the hazard and the unsafe act and unsafe condition rate with the AI. See that that's gone down, validate your actions, address the situation. If they didn't, you can obviously then iterate to address them. And then you can go back and review and say, all right, we've addressed this top hazard. What's the next one? So then you start basically building this virtuous cycle where you're continuing to drive down your exposure, which then will drive down your incident rate, which ultimately breaks out of that plateau that Jody was talking about at the beginning.
And I also like this feedback loop and the insights that you can glean from the system in comparing one site versus another site. There might be different cultural dynamics at those sites, and what you implement for a program at one may not have the same impact in the other.
That's a great point because you can identify best practices. You can understand what are my best sites doing? All right, let's capture these best practices and then disseminate them across the organization. And that really speeds up the identification and that knowledge transfer. So this is a great example of identifying HSE risks in a workflow, and that was being deployed at a warehouse. And today, what's exciting to me about this workflow is this is one of the cases where, as Jody was talking about in the beginning, they're using this solution to provide benefits to multiple stakeholders, where it's both benefits to stakeholders that have productivity concerns. You can see the AI is tracking the number of pallets, tracking the utilization of the equipment, but also on the health and safety side as well. So they're looking here at, how is my forklift being operated? As we were talking about earlier, is it getting too close to people when it is turning or lifting and conducting these higher risk activities? You can see that when the forklift gets too close to the person, the proximity alert goes from medium to high, the red box is triggered, and ultimately that triggers an alert in the system. So then management can see quickly, all right, where are my hot spots for my forklifts getting too close to people? Where do I need to take action? Potentially move things around a little bit in my warehouse so I have fewer choke points where people are getting too close to forklifts. And in addition, let me talk a little bit about some of the productivity insights. In a warehouse setting, they can look at time and labor utilization around handling, specific trucks. How many man hours, how many forklift hours were required to unload this specific truck? What was the turnaround time for these vehicles? How many employees do I have on site? So you can see that in addition to the health and safety benefits around improving forklift safety, it's also a lot of benefits for productivity. Another use case that I want to call out that they're using here as well is also tracking blocked pathways. I mean, you can see it's easy when you're handling equipment and material, put something down in the pathway, mean to come back to it, it stays there. And what you see is actually this forklift has to make a bit of a turn to avoid a piece of equipment that someone else has left in the hallway. And that is another type of hazard the AI can detect and alert from on. So for example, a supervisor can have someone move that to reduce the risk by eliminating this choke point. This is another example where you can use the AI to really augment your best practices around HSE programs for procedural adherence. And we've had some customers that have used this solution to help monitor and support their procedural adherence to their specific procedural controls. I mean, we all know in certain situations, you can't put in place an engineered control. People have to follow a specific procedure to manage this risk, to mitigate this risk. And that really relies on the human factor to follow the correct steps of that procedure to minimize that risk. And with HPCL, who deployed the solution, they saw an 80% improvement in adherence to their standard operating procedures by having the solution deployed and then being able to do targeted follow-up and coaching. In addition, they were able to eliminate some of their manual audits, which had previously cost them about $250,000 a year. So they are able to now target their people onto higher impact tasks instead of these manual audits to manually follow up on these activities. And during the period where they were deploying this, they had a specific process they were really focused on involving decantation or the transfer of fuel and flammable liquids in some of their sites. And they were able to roll this out and basically get to zero incidents during that hazardous process at their sites. Another example that I want to talk about here in the consumer packaged goods industry was the ability of a customer to use the solution to measure the impact of training and coaching. And this customer had a high-risk solvent handling procedure that required people to follow a specific static discharge procedure. They had actually had a solvent fire a couple of years earlier that had basically been catastrophic and destroyed the whole building. And what they saw is that when they deployed the system, they were still having procedural adherence issues with this. But by understanding where those procedural adherence issues were, being able to deploy targeted training, they saw over a 50% reduction in unsafe acts around this high-risk critical procedure around static discharge for solvent handling. In addition, they use it to also track procedural adherence around much lower potentially consequence incidents that are still very important to them. Things like housekeeping around their manufacturing plants to make sure that they are cleaning up any sort of spills, and also continuing to look for trip hazards in their hallways. You can see in the example on the right, someone left a cart in one of the pathways in their plant, and that obviously is being highlighted by the AI as a trip hazard that someone can move out of the way to prevent someone from potentially coming around the corner, tripping on it, and having a slip, trip, or fall from the same height.
So many folks, and John, thank you for all of those great examples related to our customers and the benefits they've been deriving. I think quantifying them is really, really important. And, as we go and build our business cases for our leaders for why an investment in visual AI, I think there's a bunch of different levers, a bunch of different areas that can provide a great starting point to build that compelling business case. I think John just spoke about some of the real direct measurable elements that you can get, looking at the ROI, looking at, the decrease in HSE costs and the costs of the audits and the frequency of the audits, looking at, how you can minimize and reduce the rates related to severity and frequency of risk. And then also being able to look at, what happens with your workers' comp payments. Maybe your insurance premiums can go down as well. And then complementing those very discrete elements from an HSE perspective with the efficiency gains, the productivity gains, the security gains that the organization can derive, that only adds additional benefit. And that's only the direct element of it. There's a whole indirect element that can also be evaluated and must be considered, because we as organizations, as from a corporate citizenship perspective, have our ESG as our top priority, our main mission. And in those ESG goals always is HSE. So why not leverage that as another lever to use in building the business case? John spoke earlier about employee satisfaction, employee morale. It also can help with the retention, the recruiting of new individuals. We all know it is much more expensive to recruit a new individual, bring them on board, train them, than to just preserve and continue to maintain and give back to that community and organization. And then you just look at general brand awareness. No one wants their organization to be front of, of a newspaper, on CNN, on Fox News, whatever your media outlet of choice is, highlighting that there was an HSE incident, God forbid, a fatality. So don't forget to leverage those elements when you are building your business case. And we as an organization are happy to partner with you on this journey and ensuring that, those factors are considered. We actually have a great tool, and this is actually accessible online, where you can plug in some of your numbers related to the ROI benefit from making an investment. It'll ask you for things like number of incidents, number of sites, number of employees, how much does it cost per incident, and then based upon statistical data that's publicly available that we're all using in the marketplace, we go through and create that ROI with you. And again, this is something we welcome and we love to partner with our clients on, because, this is, a learning experience for all of us on how to create really compelling business cases. And the ultimate goal is to make the difference, to change the trajectory of where we are and continue to see the improvements that we, where we used to see, those rapid improvements, how do we take advantage and gain those again?
I really like that you call out quantifying that ROI as well as aligning with ESG goals and the UN SDGs that are really some of these top level corporate imperatives that everyone must follow. But just kind of to summarize our discussion today, I want to circle back with 5 points on how to maximize your ROI with a solution like Visual AI. And really start off by getting visibility to target your best opportunities for HSE improvement. So identify the spots where you're going to have the highest ROI for additional HSE investment. You want to make sure you're automating your reporting to minimize your paperwork and get accurate data. So not only does this take this burden off your employees, the reality is you get now statistically robust data that doesn't have any of the sampling bias that was limiting the effectiveness of that data historically. And now, because you're tracking those KPIs, as you make those investments, you roll out that training, you can actually quantify that ROI. So, it's not saying, it's not a case of, well, I think we should put this there, invest in this training, and the team said it was a good training, so we think it was good. Instead, it's a much more quantified conversation we deployed forklift training. We saw a 60% reduction in forklift near misses. We know that from our HSE triangle, this is our HSE incident rate with forklifts. We've reduced that by 60%. This is our HSE cost with the forklift incident. Therefore, we have reduced our exposure by 170,000 pounds, for example. So you have a very quantified measure of the benefit of a HSE investment. As Jody mentioned, because you have the dashboards and the ability to compare between sites, you can identify sites and locations that have those best practices and quickly identify those high ROI HSE programs. So even for a fixed budget, you're able to deploy it in ways that are going to maximize your return in terms of incident reduction and ultimately cost reduction. So you can take the same budget and use it to actually, get the next turn of the crank and drive down your HSE incident rate. And then the fifth point that I don't want to neglect is also the great one that Jody mentioned about using it to get value from different stakeholders. So although it's a solution that's, it's giving you great visibility and maximizing your HSE ROI, don't neglect, our security team can use this, our operations team can use this for tracking throughput and turnaround time. So you understand when making an investment in a solution that helps you with HSE, what are the other benefits other people are going to get? And when you're building that business case with your management on why this is a solution that they should invest in, you don't neglect the other stakeholders as well that will benefit from this solution. I think we now have a couple of minutes to take a couple of questions from the audience. We really appreciate your participation in this, and I see already some great questions starting to come in now.
One that I see popping up right now, and maybe you can address this one, what are the skills and expertise that an organization needs? And the question specifically says they don't have data science skills.
No, that's a great point. And I think a big part of deploying a solution like this is finding one that's going to be approachable for your users and your team. Because correct, it's not sustainable for every company to have to hire data science teams to build their own models, maintain their own models, and deal with all the challenges that come on the data science side of that. And that's why the approach that we've taken to this is to build a set of very robust and hardened use cases or scenarios to detect these things that essentially can be deployed from a drag and drop user interface. So we sort of say that if you understand the HSE risks of your business and you can use Excel or PowerPoint, you can use this type of solution. So it doesn't need any sort of data science solutions, data science knowledge to use. It's all managed through drag and drop interfaces. And the AI part of it is very robust and hardened, so it doesn't need management or maintenance from your specific team. So there's no need for data scientists.
The HSE budget is typically set by plant management. How can I convince them that this is a good path to go down? We had a few slides that we spoke about, one, the indirect costs. But backing up a little bit, I think it's important to identify who are those key stakeholders in the business that can derive benefit from the solution, and then building out a business case that specifically hits the KPIs and metrics that they are chartered with. So if you can do that, you will have many different groups in the organization saying, I need it, how quickly can I get it, and which phase of the program can I be in? We actually view an implementation of visual AI to be something that isn't a singular implementation. We have 125 use cases and that list keeps growing. We believe that, you have a starting point, hit those areas that are priorities to the business first, and then continue to evolve. So as you go through those various stakeholders, maybe there are elements from each part of the business that gets in the base package, and then you continue to enhance and roll out additional use cases to more and more sites. And, given, our reach, we can surely cover from a global perspective as well.
I think it's very smart to say target one or two, target the top couple of risks and show something that has a very quick benefit to the company. So people understand the technology, they understand the benefit they're getting from it very quickly, and then scale out from there. versus trying to do a much larger deployment, which takes more time for everyone to understand the value they're getting from every aspect of it. That's a great point.
One of the ways that, we have been jointly successful with our customers on is looking at the video feeds. We can show videos of, different client examples, but what gets really exciting for our customers and our partners is when they see their data, their environment. The imperative then becomes we have to do this now because something is going to happen. Do we need specialized cameras in the environment in order to run a solution like this?
That's usually one of the first things that comes up in some of the discussions around this. Our solution, is built to be as flexible to work with basically as many different camera types as possible. And I would say of all the cameras that I look at, we can work with probably 99.9% of them, essentially, of the existing security cameras that are out there and CCTV cameras that are out there. To your point, Jody, the AI is looking at the camera feed. So the AI will need to see, the camera feed needs to cover the activity that the AI wants to detect. So this also does mean sometimes when we get started, if cameras exist outside, we'll focus on use cases that apply to risks outside, like people being too close to vehicles. And then as the solution scales, people will add on cameras, and they'll frequently get them from their preferred provider or whoever can give them a good price on security cameras to cover potentially, more high risk activities inside the plant. But the general rule of thumb is if you can see on the existing camera today the activity that you want to monitor, the AI can probably monitor that for you.
And what about ongoing maintenance? Is there ongoing maintenance? I hear so much about, and again, back to the data science question at the beginning, the technical expertise, who maintains these systems long term?
That's a great point, Jody, and I kind of glossed over that earlier because definitely if you've researched AI systems, you're aware of concepts like model drift, which basically mandates that AI systems need to be updated. As conditions on the ground change, as technology evolves, you need to have a solution that the models are kept up to date so you have all the best possible performance all the time. You don't have a solution that degrades as it ages. And that's something that we provide as a service with our solution, where we maintain essentially an update server of all the latest versions of the models, and we'll periodically work with you to deploy the updates to your sites. So again, we take most of that burden on of keeping models up to date, maintaining them. We'll just coordinate with you so you're aware of, yep, we're going to do the update. This weekend, the system's going to be off for 15 minutes while the update runs. And obviously schedule that during a time typically of low or no activity. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that burden yourself, which you would have to take on, for example, if you were building your own AI models.
I think it is important to highlight again that this is an AI solution. Data science expertise experience is not essential or critical or even necessary. And while this seems like it's a heavy lift to get up and running, like with a solution like this, it's really quite simple. We have a proven methodology for deployment. It roughly, depending on number of cameras and number of sites, we could roll a system out in 8 to 12 weeks, and you can begin deriving benefits in as short as 12 weeks. So it can be pretty quick, pretty lightweight, not a heavy burden on your resources, your team. It is really something that, is quite simple once we have access to the cameras. The site manager and HSE leader, we are mobile throughout the environment all day long. How do I see the alerts that are coming in? How do I action them?
Yes, frankly, managers don't have time to sit behind desks most of the time and just look at dashboards and alerts. And although the solution does have a dashboard, the alerts can be served up in a number of different ways. A lot of our users actually use a mobile app. So as they're moving through the site, they get push notifications of alerts. That's very common, for example, in the forklift example we saw, where if there's a hazard that needs to be addressed, such as a blocked pathway, they get the push notification, they can address that. in real time. They don't have to wait till they get back to a desk to see that the alert has come in. So mobile apps are very common also in security situations. You might have a security officer that's on patrol. They can get notifications in real time, either as push notifications, text messages, even WhatsApp messages that someone's jumped a fence, so they can go right there, see and respond to that alert in the quickest time possible. Additionally, the system can integrate with IoT devices on the plant floor to provide immediate feedback. For example, in a noisy environment, you may not be able to hear or have a mobile device. So there'll be times where it'll integrate with a buzzer or an alarm, as we were talking about in the crane example, where a signal is sent over a field bus to trigger an alarm or a flashing light, or even in some cases to stop equipment based on the alert. So there are a lot of integration options, and I would say actually a lot of the alert insights that aren't actioned by someone behind a desk, but someone that's on the mobile app or receiving notifications from an IoT device in the field.
I think that was the final question that we have time for. But if there are any others, we will definitely get back to you. Just feel free to continue to submit them over the next few seconds or so, and we will make sure we cover those in a follow-up.
Well, as we wind down today, we'd like to remind you there is still a couple moments to submit a question through the Q&A function if you haven't already done so. And as you can see on the screen, you can also email info@sparkcognition.com. We also want to let everyone know about the evaluation survey we're asking you to complete. The survey will open in a different screen after this webinar. And your input is very important as it does help us improve our future webcast. With that, we end today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. We'd like to thank Jody Sass, John Haslanger, everyone at Spark Cognition, and all of you who joined us today. Take care and have a safe day.